What happens when life demands you let go of everything you thought mattered? I'm 𝗘𝗽𝗄𝗃, host of Courage to Advance, and my guest today is Harry Pickens, internationally acclaimed jazz pianist, university educator, full-time caregiver, cancer survivor, and now founder of Strategic NeuroRegulation Institute. Harry emerged from these experiences with one unshakable truth. Your nervous system is your ultimate competitive advantage. Today, he teaches leaders how to regulate their brains, transform fear, and stay calm in the storm. This conversation will give you tools that you can immediately put to use. There is a lot to cover, so let's dive in. Harry, welcome to Courage to Advance.
Thank you, Kim. I'm delighted to be here.
You've had what feels like 3 distinct plus lives: acclaimed jazz pianist, full-time caregiver, and now pioneering this neuroscience-based healing. Walk us through that journey, and what were some of the pivotal moments that moved you from one chapter to the next?
Wow, that's a really great question. I have been a musician for, 60 years now. I'm 65, and I started playing the piano when I was 5. I moved to the New York area at 19 and had the wonderful opportunity of playing with really wonderful people. In fact, I'm probably the only person alive who's played both for Dizzy Gillespie, with Dizzy Gillespie, and for the Dalai Lama.
Oh my.
In the 1980s, mostly, I was active, and I lived close to New York and was touring internationally and so forth. And during that period, I had one significant barrier to becoming my best self. That's stage fright. Stage fright was debilitating. I would not sleep for a week before performing. I'd throw up for 3 or 4 days. My heart would beat at 140 beats a minute. And I figured if I had 1 gig a week, I had maybe 6 months to live. It was pretty rough.
Oh my.
And the most important thing I learned from that, and this fits into the larger arc of my life, is I recognized that I started studying everything I could, like psychology and hypnosis and neuroscience, whatever, back in 1980, 1981. And eventually I learned how to crack the code by mostly mental rehearsal, by learning to see myself vividly as the person I wanted to become, because I realized what I was doing. Every time I sat down at the piano, automatically, all these memories of every possible mistake would come into my mind. So I was literally creating in my mind a projection of the negative and the worst possible scenario. When I learned how to consciously change that through my own disciplined use of mental and imaginal rehearsal, it began to shift. So I toured for a number of years. By early 1990s, I'd shifted to teaching on the university level. And then early 2010, we're going to fast forward about 20 years then, my mom, who lived in Eastern Kentucky with my aunt passed away, and my mom was 81 at the time. And it was really clear to me that I did not want her living the rest of her life out there. And I moved her with me into my home in Louisville, Kentucky, where I currently live. Well, Mother began as an elderly roommate, and a couple of years later, she had a surgery that was pretty debilitating. And all of a sudden, I became a basically full-time caregiver. I had to stop all my travel. I cut my work down by 75%, just doing enough to survive, basically. And for the next 8 years, I had the privilege and honor of doing one of the most difficult things I've ever done, caring for my mom through the last few years of her life when dementia took her away. So that was the second piece. After that completed itself, a few months later, COVID started, and I went through the lockdown of COVID and so forth, and some various issues. I ended up having, a couple of years later, being diagnosed with prostate cancer and navigating that journey as well. And those adversities, the caregiving and then the cancer after it, reminded me of something that I learned as a musician. And that is the only thing I can truly control is my own state of being, my own nervous system, my own brain-mind system. Everything outside me is unpredictable, maybe chaotic. I mean, the world's chaotic right now. But I learned that the one thing that I had agency over was my own state of being. And I realized in these times, these chaotic and crazy and difficult and unpredictable times that we're living in, that leaders need to recognize that a regulated nervous system is their real competitive advantage and the one thing they can control in the midst of all the turbulence. So stage fright and caregiving and what happened after that taught me the importance of regulating one's own nervous system. And now I share that with others.
And I think as we talk today, I want us to dive deeper into some ways that so that it resonates with people and feels more tangible. Because I think what you and I have talked about leading up to this conversation is so incredibly powerful. So one of the things that you've spoken about is having the clear understanding of the neuroscience of fear inside and out. And you talked a little bit about that with the stage fright and what it had you realize. What's the difference between understanding, fear and truly knowing how to be with it? And how does that come through in what you were just talking about?
Intellectual understanding is the booby prize. It's only the beginning. It's important to understand because once you understand your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala and how they work together and how if you are in a fear response, sympathetic activation, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, you don't have access to your best self. It's important to understand that. What's more important is once you understand that to have tools and practices that allow you to transform that understanding into embodied knowledge. So you notice when you are triggered, you notice when you fall into fight, flight, and you have a methodology or a tool to immediately begin to shift it. For example, the physiological sigh, where you breathe in, and then another sniff in, and then exhale. You do that 3 times, it automatically will bring you out of sympathetic activation into a more calm state. Something else you understand, when you are caught in that fight, flight, freeze, sympathetic place, an interesting thing happens. Your peripheral vision literally shrinks. You become more focused on what's in front of you and less aware of what's around you. Well, that's true not only in terms of vision, it's also true in terms of ideas. So when you are in fight, flight, freeze, you are less open to the creative breakthrough that you need. So when you learn to notice that in the moment, and then you do something to consciously release yourself from that situation, so then you can instruct your brain to help you thrive, create, and so forth.
That's really
Makes sense?
Oh, completely makes sense. And I think, part of what you and I have talked about too, and I think a lot of people listening experience is how do we find the moment to when everything is so fast and so quick, and yet we know intellectually but the actual change is so challenging when it feels like it's just these constant, moving through meetings, moving through, information coming at us. It feels challenging. How do you?
Oh, it's very challenging. I used to teach a course in university called A Course in Thriving, which was all about positive psychology. And I taught the students a very, very simple practice called inside outside, where you take a moment, you close your eyes, and you just attend to what's happening inside you for 15 seconds. Then you open your eyes and you bring all of your sensory experience outside. So you're noticing what you see, what you hear, what you feel on the outside. Then you shift back internally. You go back and forth a few times. It trains you to be present in the moment and trains you to be in your senses, not in your head. And I would say, okay, between this class and the next class, I want you to practice being fully external. Because when they would go fully external, they're looking at the trees and they're looking at the sky, they're looking at one another, the stress begins to dissolve. So you can do that when you're transitioning between one meeting or another. Take a moment and simply go fully external. Notice what's around you. Close your eyes, notice what's happening in your inner weather, and just practice making that transition. Something else you can do when you end one meeting before you go to the next is take a moment and do box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, you hold for 4. As you do that, you might come up with a phrase that you use that helps you. The phrase might be center, or rest, or remember. If you ask yourself, Kim, what is the color of calm? What color comes to your mind?
Blue.
Beautiful. Sky blue, rich sky blue.
Yep.
So here's something else you might do. You just end a meeting and you take a moment, you close your eyes, and you imagine that you are surrounded by a blue mist and you're breathing it in for 4 beats. And you say, I breathe in calm. I breathe out stress. What happens is when you imagine that color, it's already associated with you with calm. So you imagine that color, you imagine breathing in and you're activating more parts of your brain to begin to make a shift into that state of being. Those kind of things take 15, 30, 60 seconds, but they can at least help you make those transitions.
And I already feel even just doing that for the moment, I could feel my shoulders drop.
Exactly.
And just all of a sudden have that sense of a noticeable difference.
Yeah. And you mentioned something important. You said, I could feel my shoulders drop. Mm-hmm. Another really powerful thing to do is a quick body scan. You can do upper body, lower body, or both. So right now, notice, are your feet on the floor? Do you feel the soles of your feet? Mm-hmm. Are you aware of the soles of your feet, right? And then if you'll take 10 seconds to imagine you're breathing in through the soles of your feet up into your body. And this is not like metaphysical mumbo jumbo. This is physiology. You imagine breathing in through the soles of your feet, and then breathing out, breathing back down. You will immediately feel a sense of groundedness and centeredness.
My feet feel heavier.
Exactly.
Way. Yeah.
Because most of us are walking around in our heads all the time, thinking our bodies are just a taxi to carry our brains around, right? And we disconnect from our bodies. What most people don't understand, once you begin to understand how your brain works, the most marvelous, miraculous mechanism in the entire known universe, right? Once you understand that, you can begin to consciously self-orchestrate your brain mind to help you survive and thrive.
I think that even what you've just shared, and we have so much more to talk about, has already been helpful to me personally, and I think it will be to those that are listening and watching.
Wonderful. Feel the soles of your feet. Feel your hips resting on the chair. Feel the chair supporting you. Actually, if you let yourself feel the chair supporting then it allows your body to kind of rest into the power of gravity, automatically releasing another level of stress.
Yeah, and that tension that settles not just in the shoulders, but in your hips and in your back and in all these different areas that are holding you up in the ways that when you're carrying the tension.
Oh yeah, I can show you a lot more magic. And the good thing is, again, once you understand how your brain works, I think it's criminal that the average person can go through their entire education, including a master's or PhD, and they never have one class in, here's what your brain does, here's how it works, here's how to train to help you thrive, But if you think about it, the brain is the organ of perception. It's the organ that allows us to experience everything. And if we don't take care of it, we don't know how to work with it, then we end up living by default, not by design. Because our brain brain does two things. It keeps us safe, it keeps us alive, and it detects patterns. And it's detecting patterns that keep us safe, right? And so what happens is a lot of the times, our brain doing its job, we have something that happens to us. It might be a big T or a small t trauma or just a difficult life or stress or whatever. Our brain says, okay, this keeps me safe. And so you date a guy or a gal who has red hair when you're in 6th grade and she does you wrong. He does you wrong. For the rest of your life, you don't trust redheads, right? Because your brain detected that pattern and said, redheads are not safe. And so you have a boss or a colleague who has red hair and you're 40 years old and you don't trust him and you don't know why. That's because your brain did something to keep you safe. But if you understand that, you can then unhook that pattern, recognize and leave that back in 6th grade where it belongs, and then your relationship with your colleague is different. And understanding things like those trauma echoes, understanding how to imagine. I read some research the other day. It was fascinating. If you want to know a 30-second way to get somebody who's really annoying to be less annoying, here's what you do. Before you're going to go into a meeting with them, you take 30 seconds to envision a positive interaction with that person. Guess what that does? It changes your brain's filtering mechanism, so you start looking for the good. A study just two couple of days ago came out where they actually had people do that, and they reported a completely different kind of relationship with that person who just before got on their last nerve.
That is such a powerful tool. And it reminds me of the concept. It goes by a few names, but you might be familiar with it as the ladder of inference, how we we take in those beliefs and, and it's such a powerful concept of exactly what you're describing, that if we have the sense of we're going to prove our belief systems right. And so we filter what we hear or see to justify it. And if we're unconscious of that, we continue to bake in these patterns and to act on them in ways that are really perhaps very incomplete in the understanding of a situation or an individual.
The missing link around ladder of inference is it doesn't necessarily go far enough, because those beliefs, those perceptions come from somewhere.
Yes.
They come, whether it's epigenetic in our ancestry or our parenting or our upbringing or experiences that we've had. Those beliefs are encoded specifically through our perception and experience. And the power of memory reconsolidation, which is the neurobiological mechanism whereby we can update memory, because when you remember something, you never remember what actually happened. You're recreating that memory in the moment. When we understand how that works, then we can unhook the triggers and the emotional pain from those memories, thereby shifting the belief completely.
What I think is interesting too, as you say that, is we think about how divided media is in our US-based culture these days, right? And that divide, whether that's social media and algorithms, whether that's, more traditional media sources of where people choose to go and get their news sources, or even inside organizations as we think about what we're messaging and, and kind of promoting our own interests.
Yes.
I think it makes what you're talking about even more important for us to find ways to discipline ourselves around seeking out not just the good, but the real context and the real larger understanding of one another in situations, because that's not happening in what we're being fed or easily accessed.
Yes, and just like a few minutes ago, you noticed your shoulders were raising. It's like you became aware of your physical body in that moment, right?
Yeah.
We need to become aware when we are being manipulated by media to fall to the base of our brainstem and get triggered around fear, greed, and anger. So, for example, you notice when you read something and all of a sudden you get activated, really angry about it, right? Now, it might be you're angry at an injustice, which is perfectly okay. But it also might mean that you've gotten hooked into an algorithm that is designed to keep you hooked and designed to push those buttons of emotionality. And so when you notice that, it's like, oh, I've been doom scrolling for 10 minutes and I'm getting angry and angrier. And as I go down this rabbit hole, you can stop, make a shift, notice what's happening, and then make a conscious choice. Otherwise, you're actually going from unconscious reaction to unconscious reaction. And when that comes to political polarization, it's important. I have very strong opinions personally about what's happening with democracy in the United States. Very strong. At the same time, I also work very hard to cultivate the equanimity to be able to have a conversation with somebody on the other side without getting constantly triggered, angry, afraid, fearful, etc. And that's a really important skill, especially for leaders, because you are managing multiple, whether it's political perspectives or other kind of perspectives. Your job is to be the calm in the storm that can mediate all the difference. And if you don't have control over your own nervous system, you get pulled by whatever wind or wave is present.
And it just keeps being this snowball effect.
It gets worse and worse and worse, because the other thing is our brain perceives patterns and then habituates them, right? So there are many of us who become addicted to our opinions, our anger, our fear. John F. Kennedy had a fabulous quote. He said, "Too many people enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought."
Oh,
too many people enjoy the comfort of opinion without and I mean, this was like 65 years ago, right? Is that true now more than ever? And so learning how to observe one's own opinions, which also is uncomfortable always, right? But to observe one's own opinions to create some kind of distance that allows you to make conscious choices. And it's all neurobiology.
Yeah.
Because whenever we're in fight, flight, freeze, our peripheral vision shrinks, our need to defend ourselves increases, and we don't see a wider perspective.
I mean, it makes sense. And then it's about finding the ways to have the positive triggers that have us realize, oh, this is where I'm starting to go or what's happening, and bringing forward one of these techniques to disrupt that pattern.
Right. And you said positive triggers. That's another thing that's really powerful, because one of the things that I do in my workshops is we always start with priming. And what I mean by priming is let's like warm up for your brain, right? And most people, we know that our brains are primed for the negative. So it's called a negativity bias, because it's more important for us to not miss a tiger that might be there than to notice beauty that's there, right? We want to make sure we stay safe all the time. What happens then is our brain is constantly scanning for threat, not only present moment threat, but even in our memories and our thoughts of the past. So even though that's the truth, every one of us has had many, many beautiful experiences. We've had moments of calm, of awe, of wonder, of delight, of ecstasy, of joy, but we don't access those consistently. Mm-hmm. When we learn how to focus specifically on that stuff, if I ask you to think about a joyful moment in the last week or two, and just let your brain begin to scan and bring you that moment, what you've done is you've focused the lens of your attention in the direction of the frequency of joy. And the more you do that, the more joy you can bring into the present moment. The same is true with any state of being. But we don't open the treasure chest of our positive experiences because we're so locked into the threat of our fearful ones.
And so when we talk about some of the big transitions you've made, and we're talking a little bit about this too, most leaders can't even step away for a week without still feeling connected or carrying this with them. What did you learn, about what's really essential versus what we convince ourselves is essential, especially whether it was from that time of the caregiving with your mother or just some other aspects of this journey you've been on?
Kim, I have been either we would call very lucky or very not lucky. I don't know what you want to describe it. But so caregiving is not for sissies, first of all. I love my mother tremendously. And those 8 years were really, really hard. But speaking to your point, I learned through the caregiving experience that most of what I thought mattered didn't matter. When you confront extreme illness and something as horrific as dementia, and I'm an only child, so it was all up to me, and it's my mother who I love dearly, you realize, okay, what is really important is not 99% of the things I thought were important before this moment. So, for example, it's 12 o'clock at night. I've just gotten to sleep. I hear a thud in the next room. My mother has fallen. I spent the entire day teaching a workshop. I've got one the next morning. And it's 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I am there lying with my mother. She's in too much pain for me to even lift her up at that moment. And all I can do in that moment is be present and loving. And that's the only thing that mattered. That's the only thing that existed in that moment. How can I be of present service to this human being? And that's what the caregiving taught me. It taught me that everything else, and then of course the last few days of her life until she passes away or whatever, and then of course my cancer diagnosis a few years later, it's like when you are facing the ultimate end of every human life, which is death, it brings an astonishing clarity about what really matters. I remember David Brooks, who I really love. I don't always agree with him politically, but I love everything he writes. Many years ago, he had an essay in the New York Times, and he was talking about character. He was talking about how he was at a place in his life. I think he'd gone through a divorce. He was in his 50s or whatever. He was kind of going through this midlife transition that we all go through. And he said, I'm noticing the people I admire are people who I feel live by what I call eulogy values. That is, they live as though they're reflecting on what somebody's going to say when they're gone. Kim was a good human being. She was loving. She cared for people. She was compassionate. She brought the best of herself to every relationship, whatever. He said, I'm finding those are much more attractive to me than resume values, which are all the degrees and all the professional accolades and everything and accomplishments. And I agree with David Brooks. I think if we will take a look, and of course there's that, I think it's in the Stephen Covey book, and this is a common practice of writing your own eulogy. I've done it about 7 or 8 times in my life. But if you actually if you have the courage to take yourself into the moment when you are no longer alive in this physical form, whatever happens after it, I don't know, but you're no longer here. What are the things you want people to say about you? Oh, he was an outstanding accountant and was responsible for an X percentage, increase in profitability or whatever, I don't think anybody's going to say that matters.
No.
And I'm not saying you ignore those things, but I mean, I think that kind of perspective puts things in perspective. The complexity, the intensity, the financial rewards, the addiction to busyness, all of those things cloud our judgment because they also keep us in constant sympathetic activation, right? And when you're in sympathetic activation, your peripheral vision narrows, you're focused on the task in front of you, and you don't think contextually, right? So the neurobiology of all of the stress and all the activity and all the rewards cripples your ability to see a wider context. And when you can't see a wider context, you can't make wise decisions. So you have to get away in some way from the constant dopamine hacking of the attention-grabbing media, as well as from your work, even if it's for a day or a week or something, or even an hour or two, you have to separate from that in order to regain yourself. And what caregiving forced me to do is to regain myself in the caring for another, because it took me violently away from everything I had invested in the world. Long answer.
No, fantastic. And I think it's that, we talk about needing to regain perspective, but even saying it in that way feels very disconnected from actually what that really means, what it means to really take bigger stock of what matters. And like you, I'm an only child and I have an only child. And so I recognize that. Right. When it's like there is not anyone else who,
right,
when these choices are going to need to be made, who needs to make them.
And as the mother of an only child, your love for that child is beyond immense, and their love for you is beyond immense.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking when you talk about what matters, I'm also reminded years and years ago, a guitar player came to me. I think he was in college, and he was really burned out. And he's like, I'm not getting any fulfillment out of music, whatever. I challenged him. I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. Once a week, I want you to find and map in the community, who are the people who are suffering the most? The kids in the cancer ward in the hospital, or the orphans, or elders, or homeless, whatever. You find out who are the people in this community who are suffering the most. And then once a week, you go and you play your guitar for them. His life completely transformed.
Wow.
Because that helped him get in touch with what really matters with music. I mean, for me, I went through a period of, okay, I want to be really great. I want to have great technique. I want to impress people. Whatever. I want to have a career, right? But then I had another experience when I realized, no, what really matters to me with music is connecting with other human beings. Mm. And so when he had the experience of connection, it shifted his own sense of values and what was important and helped him reconnect with that essential truth.
And something that meant so much to him at one point, right? That's so powerful too. In other conversations, you've said that, that compassion, as you described here, really can fuel that creativity. And yet we both have talked about how many organizations treat compassion as this soft, kind of skill, if you will, or soft and kind of moment. And yet we know that the idea of compassion and creativity are what can fuel, in some ways, these superpowers or these amazing moments. What do leaders miss when they try to separate creativity and compassion, and they don't see it as the power of the two together?
It's the same as I'm sure you deal with all the time with your research on trust.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Every time we split head and heart, every time we split our intellect from our emotional world, we are impoverished. And if you go to the Research on Heart Math Institute or other areas who are beginning to explore this, really, the heart and the brain are connected. And when leaders are in a state of cardiocoherence, they make better decisions, they have more ideas, they're more productive, they sleep better, they're healthier. So we are almost at a point, we're a point where the research is indicating beyond a shadow of a doubt that when you can awaken an optimal state of being, and when I say optimal state of being, I'm talking about a state of being where you're connected to yourself, but you're also compassionately connected to others. That's part of the nature of optimal functioning. Everything works better. And I'm not talking about mealy-mouthed compassion. I'm not talking about being sentimental. I'm not talking about ignoring the bottom line, but I'm talking about recognizing like the Africans saying, I am because you are. We are connected, and you and I are connected. And as we get to know each other, our connection expands. And as I see you, Martin Buber, the German theologian, said we tend to see the world in one of two ways. We see the world as a collection of objects where I am separate from everything else, I, it, or we see the world as a collective of subjects, I, thou. Everything is holy, everyone is sacred. And even getting out of a spiritual context, the idea is that if you live in an I, it world, a transactional world, which that's what businesses are essentially, but if you live in that world, you become impoverished because when everyone else is an object, then the temptation to manipulate and to cheat and to mistreat is extremely high. On the other hand, when you see everyone as valid just as you are, sacred, valuable, worthy, then you interact with them from a very different place. And when you interact from that place, you awaken through co-regulation, neurobiological co-regulation. We are contagious to one another's values and states. So if I look at you, Kim, with a look that says, I don't really care about you, you're just an object, you're just a way to get me to another place in my career, guess what? You feel that. You know that on a subcutaneous kind of unconscious level. Your eyes, your ears, your heart, your brain detects this person is not a safe person. It's like the research on psychological safety. On the other hand, if I am with you in a way that you know in your gut, heart, and soul that I truly care about you as a human being, then guess what? You will perform better. And our relationship will thrive. So I think compassion and creativity is really about connecting the heart and the brain and connecting the we with the me.
I really resonate with that when we think about that head and heart connection being so critical. And I think we are at a place in our business maturity, at least of a US culture, where that's not such a negative in the way people hear it. There was this sense of, there was so much toxicity around the idea that those two things should be together for such a long time. And now with, as you said, all the research that's coming out and the reality of the real positive impact it's having, it's starting to become a real, just a more like yes, that's part of the strategy. We should be doing more of that.
Yeah, this is why I ground my work in neurobiology, because you can argue forever about philosophy or spirituality or head versus heart or whatever, but you can't argue with evidence-based research, right? You can't argue with the fact that we know that our brains are plastic and that we are our consciousness creates our circuitry. Who we are now as what we envision transforms the literal structure of our brains. And I know that if I envision myself performing well, it's not imagination. It's imagination transforming into neural infrastructure. I know that my memories, I can reconsolidate a memory and I shift that, it makes a significant difference in my synaptic structure. And so when you understand the fundamentals of neurobiology, how your brain works, then all of a sudden, all these things that were called foo-foo or, flaky even 3 or 4 years ago, it's like, no, it's solid. It's brain science.
Completely solid. So talk a little bit about now what you're building, the Strategic NeuroRegulation Institute, where you are training practitioners in trauma healing techniques. It's essentially creating this movement. And I think it's really important to share more about that. And also, can you speak to what are you building now that couldn't have existed before your own transformation in the way that you're bringing this forward to others?
One can get a PhD from Harvard or Yale or Oxford or whatever, and it brings you a tremendous amount of intellectual credibility and knowledge and wisdom. But there's also the PhD that you earn from the School of Life, which provides, I remember Buckminster Fuller took, I think, a 2 or 3 year vow of silence because he wanted to eliminate and clean his mind of everything he had learned that came from anywhere else. And he wanted to live based on what he called my only by experience one knowledge. My stage fright experience, my caregiving experience, my COVID experience, my cancer experience, all of those things taught me, not on an intellectual level, but on an intimately embodied level, that number one, my brain is malleable. Number two, that states are skills. Number three, that I could learn to orchestrate my own brain-mind system and become a virtuoso of being. That's the name of my next book. So I could learn to consciously, just as a musician, if you play Chopin, that's a certain state. If you play Beethoven, it's a certain state. If you play Duke Ellington, it's a different state. You have to go into those different states of being. Just as I do that, or just as a martial artist trains in a kick or a punch or whatever, leaders can train themselves to access the states that they need. I believe in this incredibly turbulent age that your nervous system, your capacity to regulate your own nervous system is the ultimate competitive advantage. And if you are walking around these days and you're stressed out and you're afraid and you're reactive and you're stuck and you're projecting your anger or whatever on your people, you are going to lose the long game. So Strategic NeuroRegulation Institute is all about bringing the power of applied neurobiology to leaders and to ordinary people. Because as I said before, I think it's criminal that we can go all the way from kindergarten to graduate school and professional training and never learn how to train our own brain to help us achieve our goals and our objectives. And so my desire, my dream is for every human being ultimately on the planet to understand simple principles about their brain, how to get out of fight, flight, freeze, how to clear those triggers that have been bugging you since you were 6 years old, how to reclaim your power by connecting with your best self, how to redesign your future through mental rehearsal and through practicing the states you want. And so that's really what I want to do. I want to help people learn how to take charge of their own brain. I as you mentioned, I train practitioners in several very gentle techniques for releasing emotional pain, stress, and trauma that come out of my study of EFT, havening, and other psychosensory modalities. So I integrate all of that into my work with executives, leaders, et cetera.
Some of the things you brought for your own healing when you were going through your cancer diagnosis, and some things that you created to increase your own state of mind and vibrational energy. Are there some things there that you want to speak to as well?
Kim, we could talk about this for about 30 hours. I'm just going to give you a tiny version. So I got my diagnosis in January 2024. And for the year before that, I had been deeply immersed in AI, learning how to use it for myself, helping people learn how to work with it. I'm actually have another book I'm writing. It's called How to Use AI Without Losing Your Mind. It's all about cognitive hygiene. So you don't allow the algorithm in the system to atrophy your own capacity for thinking. But what happened is about 6 months into my diagnosis, I had played around with Suno Audio, some of these AI music generators. And honestly, as a professional musician, the output was awful, just awful. But by the time, a few months after my diagnosis, they'd gotten a lot better. And I said, this is interesting because I'm meditating, I'm doing affirmations, I'm doing all these things to support my well-being. But when I got that diagnosis, instantly, I was fighting the demons of worry, catastrophic thinking, fear, all the things that we do when something like that hits, right? And so I realized I am going to create songs using AI that speak both in the lyric and the genre to the way I want to feel, not just the way I feel now. So if I were feeling afraid, I'd create, and I'll play a couple of them for you in a moment. I'd create a song about faith. If I needed determination and grit, I'd use like a hard rock kind of style or even a rap style. If I wanted to connect with my spiritual self, I'd create something meditative. If I wanted to connect with a sense of archetypal resonance, like feeling like I'm the wounded healer, I'm going through a dark night or the phoenix rising, I'd create music that fit that genre. Because what I found in AI is I always love pop music. I love the grooves, I love the feelings. But a lot of times I hated the lyrics, because most pop music is written for somebody between age 13 and 17. It's about love, lost. It's about getting, having a party, all, things like that. And I'm 60 plus years old. I don't really want to talk about, my girlfriend left me or I want, whatever. And so I realized that I could use the alchemical power of musical genre, because you listen to certain kinds of music, you feel a certain way. Some music opens the heart, some music activates your power, some music quiets your mind, etc. I could combine that with lyrics that I'd written specifically to help me absorb the state I wanted. So I'll give a couple examples here. So when I was feeling the least faith of all, I wrote this.
I have faith that I can heal. I trust the wisdom that is being real. I see myself completely well. I feel the light in all myself.
When I heard 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀 say the power that built the body heals the body. So I created a series of lyrics and a chant, and I generated this song.
The power that builds my body heals my body. The power that heals my body loves me now.
I wanted a song that was an anthem that would be sort of like rock, my version of Rocky, that would be about healing and thriving. So I generated this one. And the words are all mine. And then I learned how to prompt Suno for the style.
I stand tall, unafraid and strong. My body knows right from wrong. Every cell aligned with health's design. This healing journey is wholly mine. I affirm my power to renew. Every day my strength breaks through. Prostate healing cell by cell. Within this body all is well. I rise, I heal, I thrive, every part of me alive.
So I created these songs and I put them on a soundtrack and I would listen to it every day. I'd walk for an hour, hour and a half a day. And what I noticed over months, and I'll tell you the story of how this all ended in a moment, but what I noticed over the months is that I started actually believing the words. I started feeling that possibility. I started having the faith. Now, what happened is January 2024, I got the diagnosis. April 2025, I had surgery. I had a very aggressive cancer that through my holistic means, I was able to reverse the aggressiveness and shrink the tumor, but not enough to avoid surgery. I was wanting to avoid it completely. But I made significant progress and my cancer actually went backwards where under normal circumstances it would have gotten much worse. So I'm not going to say that doing this did it, but I spent several hours a day with lots of different kinds of holistic things. I want to share one more song with that, because this song was my whole story. And I'll share just a minute of it, but there's a line in it that's relevant to our conversation. So here it is.
Spoke those words that day. My world grew small, the future slipped away. But something deep inside refused to bend. This chapter starts, but is not how I'll end. I heard with a voice beyond my own. Created worlds where healing light was shown. True golden visions wrote my triumphs tell. Set sail for shores where hope would still prevail. I am not the story I've been told. I am the teller, sovereign and bold. The facts are facts, but meaning's mine to make. This path I walk, this journey I will take.
That one tears me up all the time, because that phrase,
my goodness.
I am not the story I've been told. I am the teller, sovereign and bold. That became my mantra when I would be in the place of significant fear or waiting for a test result, or the test result not being what it wanted, or just navigating all of that. I am not the story I've been told. And that's neurobiologically true too, because we are constantly creating our own narrative by how we perceive the events we experience. And so I am not the story I've been told. I am the teller, sovereign and bold, became kind of the core. And that those songs got me through. Those songs literally got me through that situation. And I mean, I'm still recovering from surgery, so they still continue to help me. Again, the primary principle here, Kim, that I'm teaching is states are skills. Mm-hmm. States of being are skills like learning to play tennis, or learning to play the piano, or learning karate, or learning cooking. And if you are willing to devote the time and energy of cultivating your states of being and learning how to orchestrate your own nervous system, then you can live as the calm in the storm and the eye in the hurricane, no matter what's happening around you.
And I just think that's something that we all can benefit from, and not we don't probably have enough of it in the way we're thinking. So Harry, I'm just so encouraged with our conversation, and I'm finding my own self motivated in the things that you've shared that I need to do consistently. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more about the work you and your organization are doing?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Harry Pickens on LinkedIn, and you can go to Strategic NeuroRegulation, mouthful.com, strategicneuroregulation.com. And you can also learn there about how I work, and you can sign up to have a conversation with me about working with you individually. I do executive sprints where we take 5 days, either 5 days in a row or 5 days over 2 weeks. And every day we spend 30 minutes learning very specific tools for regulation that you can put into practice immediately.
That seems deeply valuable and very tangible to get started. So thank you so much. We'll make sure the links are also in the show notes. I so appreciate your conversation with us today. And what I'm feeling is got such deep gratitude to you. I really thank you very, very much.
Well, it's an honor to know you. I look forward to getting to know you better over the years. And thank you so much for the invitation and giving me a chance to talk about something I care about.
You are absolutely welcome. For our listeners, we have resources relevant to our conversation today that you can access by visiting courage2advancepodcast.com. And remember to like and follow our podcast on your favorite platform so more leaders can benefit from these conversations. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Courage to Advance, where transformative leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about having the courage to find them.